I love what Amy said, we're all here to serve each other. And I would take that further. We're all here to take care of each other, right? And that's how every profession should be. Unfortunately, in too many cases, we're actually using each other. We're exploiting each other. We should be feeding each other, taking care of each other. We are devouring each other. And that's the reality in the world of business, and I suspect in some corners of the healthcare industry as well. Could you make it a little louder, please? So my talk today is about the reality that everybody matters and that we need to take care of all the people who are touched by whatever we do in the world of business or in healthcare. I'm going to treat this like a business. I know it's nonprofits for the most part, but fundamentals are still the same that apply here. And this is based on a book that I'm working on now, which I will talk about a little bit later. So we live in a world of great beauty, a world of lots of extraordinary things that are happening and have happened. But at the same time, we have to recognize that it is a world that still has a great deal of suffering in it. There's an extraordinary amount of suffering all over the planet. There's billions of people still struggling to get by. There's physical deprivation, but there's also a great deal of what we would say psychic suffering in the world. Physical violence is down dramatically. We're living in the most peaceful time by far in human history, but psychic suffering and planetary suffering are actually on the rise. And a great deal of that is related to how we work. And I'm sure you're all more familiar than I am with these kinds of numbers. The levels of anxiety and depression and even suicide have actually been going up, not only here, but all over the world. The millennial generation, I just read, has the highest level of suicide of any generation ever. So there's something that is sick in our societies. There's something that is not working. We're not really realizing or achieving human flourishing in the way that we should be, given the amount of progress we've made in material terms. 88% of Americans feel they work for a company that actually doesn't view them or care about them as a human being. They're viewed as a function, as an object. Language matters. Right? So if you think about even the phrase, a lot of you here are in human resources. Human beings, I believe, are not a resource. We are the source. And you treat something like a resource, it's like a lump of coal. It burns out, right? But a source is where everything comes from. And sources do not deplete. Likewise, capital. Again, human beings are not capital. We're in a unique category. So we have to think about what that means. If you look at the level of engagement that people have, I'm not sure what it is in the healthcare sector, but across the board in the United States, about 32% of people actually are engaged in their work. In other words, they care about what they're doing. About 50% are disengaged or not engaged. They don't care about it. It's just a job. Their body is there, but really they're not there in spirit. And close to 20%, down to 16 now, actually hate their work. Right? And these are actually some of the highest numbers in the world. Overall, only 15% of people are engaged on this planet. And think about what that means. So not only is that a financial drain, obviously, with all the lost productivity, but it's really a human tragedy, I think. We have this one life to live, right? Except in India, we have many lives. Most of you, one life to live and work. Work is inherently important in our life. We're the only species that works even when we don't have to, because it's a source of meaning and purpose, or can be. I think Freud said love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness, and we've kept these two things separate. I was at a conference in Seattle a few years ago. The Dalai Lama was speaking, and he said heart attacks are highest on Monday morning. You all must know this, actually, right? I was giving this talk, a version of this talk in Boston once, and the head of one of the local hospitals actually was there. And she said, yeah, it's 4 a.m. on Monday morning. What does that say about our work cultures? That people are literally getting heart attacks at the prospect of going to. I was in Saginaw, Michigan 6 months ago launching our Conscious Capitalism chapter there. Small community, 100,000 or so population. And I mentioned this, and later on somebody said to me, I had some heart problem a couple of years ago, so I have to go in for periodic checkups. And I called Monday morning to get my results, and they put me on hold for 90 minutes. And finally, when somebody picked up and he asked, what's going on? She said, oh, Monday mornings are crazy around here. Right? So this is what we're doing. through our work. Jeffrey Pfeffer at Stanford just published a new book where they looked at all the different ways in which work actually impacts people's well-being, mostly for the negative. And the estimate is that about 120,000 Americans are killed or die every year because of work-related stress. These are incremental deaths. And that's just one impact. That's impact on employees. What is the impact of the way we work on their children, on their families, on their communities? What's the impact on our customers, right? There's a broad impact that we have to look at of the way in which we work. And it's not the work itself, it's the way in which we work that is causing the suffering. The Global Wellness Institute estimates that there's about a $2.2 trillion cost to this. But again, we tend to get too quickly to the numbers. It's the human cost that is far greater than the monetary cost. And if you look at the financial side of this, that's also very significant. There's a lot of chest thumping nowadays about the booming economy and the low unemployment rate and the richest country in the world going through what looks like an economic renaissance. And what's the reality out there for most people is that 60% of American households actually are technically insolvent. Their liabilities exceed their assets. And 50% of American households actually have less than $400 in the bank. 100 million Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Hardly any buffer at all. $400 in the bank, think about that. And if they needed $2,000 within 30 days, would not be able to come up with it. So a small problem becomes a disaster. Somebody gets sick, your car breaks down, your heating, whatever it is, suddenly it's a crisis, right? And life is full of these kinds of challenges. So people are living so close to the edge. The amount of stress that people are dealing with, because financial stress shows up obviously in physical symptoms. Everything from migraines to high blood pressure to ulcers to anxiety, all these things, right? Much more accentuated when people have financial stress, and that is the norm. That is actually most people living with extreme amounts of that, and small things derail their lives completely. So the way we work isn't working. And I would argue that's a universal statement that applies to every sector. Business, certainly, healthcare, government, universities, I would say everywhere. There's something very, very dysfunctional about the way most organizations and most industries are working. I'm sure there are many exceptions in this room, and there are many exceptional companies as well. But overall, I would say this is very true, because the human cost of doing business is nowhere accounted for. We don't get an invoice, for the impact on a family of the way, this amount of stress that happens at work, or for the shortened lives, or for all the other consequences that flow from this. So I believe, therefore, that healing is not just something that you all are involved in. I believe that all of us, regardless of what we do, at some level need to be about healing. Because healing is about meeting each other's needs. Healing is about taking care of each other. Healing is about serving each other. Can we alleviate suffering? Can we bring more joy through what it is that we do? Because we feel the need for this at every level. We feel we need to heal ourselves, right? We need to heal our families and our communities.